Dead Money is the first Fallout New Vegas DLC. It was released in December of 2010 on the Xbox 360 and in February of 2011 on the PS3 and PC, a mere 2 to 4 months from the game's initial release. And if you remember what I said in my New Vegas video, it took them a half a year worth of updates and patches to get the game to finally work closer to how it was intended to work on release. And even then, the game still had a crap ton of glitches and problems with a lot of its quests, locations and NPCs. I think it was a bit too early to be released, but on the other hand, they were still under deadline from Bethesda, so there wasn't much they could do but work on still patching the base game and rolling out Dead Money on schedule. So pour yourself a stiff Sierra Madre Martini and join me for a talk about Dead Money. Rick?
You are getting to be your best customer.
And let's start it there. What does Dead Money actually mean? It's a poker term, which in general refers to money that has been added to the pot by players who have now folded. The term is also used in a derogatory way when referring to poker players who can technically win a pot but aren't skilled enough to do so. It can also be used to describe players who go into games way above their skill level. I believe these latter two definitions are what the Dead Money in the DLC title referred to, but we'll get to that once we talk about characters and story. It is fairly obvious how Dead Money was aiming for a heavy horror thriller vibe, similar to what was achieved in Vault 22 from the base game, which I talked about in more detail during the New Vegas video, but it doesn't quite make it all the way. It's one of those cases where you can see the ingredients in there, and they're quality ingredients, but something is a bit off with the mix overall. Keep in mind, I didn't say wrong, I said off, as in not optimal for what they were going for. Possibly due to engine limitations, time constraints, and maybe even some focus testing, Dead Money doesn't exactly reach the horror threshold, at least in my mind. Instead, it becomes a fairly solid survival thriller. Survival is in general an aspect of horror overall, but in terms of gaming, it can be and is its own design approach. So what makes Dead Money part survival game even if you're not playing it in hardcore mode? Although, like I suggested in the New Vegas video, you should totally play the game in hardcore mode. Everything in the game is against you. The setting, the setup, and the story all work against you. So let's start with the setting. After following the Sierra Madre radio signal, you reach an abandoned Brotherhood of Steel bunker. Explore it and decide to investigate further. Depending on your science skill, you may open the side room of the bunker where you'll find a bunch of useful and interesting things that foreshadow the events to come. After approaching the radio that's been constantly playing the signal, you black out and wake up in a dilapidated mini ghost town with the green face and the voice of Elijah, this DLC's antagonist, and a character that you might have heard of during the base game. Elijah was the Brotherhood Elder in charge of the taking of Helios 1 and subsequent failed keeping of it when faced with the NCR. More on him later. Both the sky and your surroundings seem to be cloaked in a reddish cloud, affecting your vision and, as you'll find out fairly quickly, steadily affecting your health. There are weird sounds coming from both the environment and your enemies, as well as various sound stings here and there. The sound design is really solid for the horror vibe they were obviously going for. The red cloud is a characteristic of the Sierra Madre. It is highly toxic to any living creature and it has acted as a type of protective shield around the entire location, keeping adventurers either at a distance or outright killing them. While simply being outside in this DLC will steadily lower your HP, there are certain spots where the cloud is more dense. These should be avoided when possible or passed through at the highest speeds, since these dense patches will kill you extremely fast. The cloud is by far the most present threat in Dead Money, much more so than your bomb collar, which is what I'll talk about now. So you begin the story at a severely diminished capacity to survive because all your gear and items are taken away and you find yourself wearing a jumpsuit and a bomb collar around your neck with Elijah doing his opening villain speech. You quickly find out that not only your ability to fight and survive is limited, but your movement is limited as well, at least temporarily, partly by the earlier mentioned zones of dense cloud, as well as the speakers and radios. You see, the bomb color's frequency interferes with that of the Sierra Madre audio systems, so being too close to a working speaker or a radio will lead to the bomb color going off after 10 seconds. Thankfully, the colors start beeping when you are in the range of one of these things, and this allows you enough time to retreat and then quickly explore the region till you find the offending object and either shut it down or shoot it up. Suffice to say, it's highly likely that your previous way of playing the game is pretty much out the window unless you are already playing a stealth ninja sort of build.
We're stealth ninjas. We make no sound.
Any power armor build dissolves into nothingness since all your gear is taken, and this DLC could pose a bit of an extra challenge to low endurance characters, because while there are companions in the DLC, they will only be temporarily assisting you, and like I said earlier, simply being outside will chip away at your health constantly. The enemies in Dead Money, the Ghost People, are like none other you've encountered before, and in order to permanently dispatch them, you will have to cut off their limbs. You can also shoot those off, but I could not resist making that Dead Space reference. By the way, I reviewed the Dead Space Downfall animation a while back, just FYI. And also one of my favorite means of dealing with them was to knock them unconscious and then switch to a melee weapon and go to town.
He's hacking and whacking and smacking. 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 He just hack, whack, chopping at me.
The Ghost People look almost like they're wearing old-timey diving suits, an impression that gets strengthened when you hear the sounds they make. The suits were in fact bought as a means of protecting the workers from the red toxic cloud that sprung up from some of the pipes while the casino and the adjacent villa were being built, and we will get to visit the place where both those things come from in a future video. The writings on the walls are a very particular aesthetic and story characteristic of Dead Money. They range from useful to descriptive to just fucking depressing, but they help offer some context and give you an idea of the numbers of people that Elijah has previously directly or indirectly killed. These past victims are mentioned several times, but it's the writings on the walls that really make them a palpable sort of presence. Well, that and the various items that some of them left to be found, and not to mention the skeletons. Case in point being this supremely weird occultish ritual room maybe? I don't know what exactly it is, maybe it was just someone mourning a partner they had cared for. I don't know, but it gave me occult vibes. The Fallout games have historically rewarded exploration ever since the first one, but nowhere is that more evident and necessary, I think, than in Dead Money. And backtracking is something that goes hand in hand with it. You will be spending a bunch of time walking on and jumping across the same streets, rooms and rooftops in order to make sense of where you're supposed to be going, while dodging the cloud patches, but sometimes not. This will offer you several sweeps of the same places, which will allow you to find as many useful things in them as possible. Terminal lore is one of my favorite things that was introduced with the 3D Fallouts. Sure, computer entries existed in the previous ones, but in the 3D Fallouts, terminals became a separate feature of the game. They allow you to turn automated systems on and off, open safes, and also learn a lot about what was happening to and with the people that used them, usually in the days or years before the bombs fell. It makes really no sense that so many of these things would still be in working condition. But on the other hand, nobody's experimented with turning a computer on and leaving it on for 100 years and then see if it still works. So maybe it's not that far-fetched? In the case of Dead Money, the terminals in the villa give us a picture of money embezzling contractors, drug-using workers, corrupt officials, and we also find out about the start of what would later become the Cloud, as well as explanations of where the vending machines, holograms and hazmat suits come from. All of them come from a place called Big Mountain, where apparently the cuttingest of cutting-edge science and engineering was being worked on before the war. There are a few really special vending machines dotting the region of the villa and inside the casino as well. They only accept Sierra Madre chips as currency, but curiously enough, they not only supply items, but you can also turn in certain items to the vending machines for more chips. The list of items that you have access to from these machines can be expanded as you explore more of the DLC via software updates. The truly fascinating thing about these isn't that they're still working, it's that they're basically Star Trek replicators, which has to be said is some fairly advanced and still theoretical technology even for the retrofuturistic post-apocalypse of the Fallout universe. Otherwise, the villa is a narrow street, treasure trove of Sierra Madre chips, various other items you will desperately need, a lot of traps, and the occasional bunch of enemies. As opposed to the base game, where everything you might need is in near unlimited amounts if you know where to find them, in Dead Money you actually have to actively look for them in the places where people might put them and forget them, where they might have been purposefully hidden, or where they might have fallen as a result of the bombs and subsequent years of trespassing by other adventurers looking to get into the Sierra Madre. You'll find useful items on top of boxes that you can only see if you've already climbed on something, behind couches and other larger pieces of furniture on shelves and in drawers. Looting in Dead Money is less about taking everything you can and then seeing later what you can do with it, and more about being very selective with what you pick up. Because unless you're running a high strength build, your carry weight will be a very hard limit to the amount of stuff you can carry with you. This is one spot where either a power armor build or a companion supported build, such as mine, will add a bit of extra challenge to the proceedings. Once you gain access to the casino, the cloud won't be as much of a problem since you'll be inside, but the issues here are related to the holographic defense system installed in the building. These are holograms that can hurt you really bad, but thankfully have a limited range of motion as well as limited vision. These work around the same sci-fi-esque for now concept of turning energy into matter that the vending machines also work on. I know an experiment has been running since 2018 trying to smash two photons together, looking to get a positron and an electron, but I haven't found any sort of update on that experiment as of writing this. But the holograms can generally be reprogrammed or shut down from terminals, or you can simply turn off the emitters once you find them. There are a couple of holograms in the actual casino where you can play blackjack and roulette. I'm a bit surprised you can play poker, but whatever, I do enjoy me some blackjack now and again.
I'm shocked to find that gambling is going on in here.
The casino is also where you'll discover the final fate of all the characters in the story, both past and present. So let's talk about the cast of characters and the story that plays out. The proper DLC characters that you will be interacting with are the super mutant dog / god, the previous club singer Dean Domino, who is a ghoul now, Christine, whom you find in an autodoc, her head and throat having been operated on, and finally Elijah. But there are at least two other characters that are just as important as your companions and the villain. Two characters that died over 200 years ago, and who are the reason for the existence of the Sierra Madre, Sinclair and Vera. Some very minor semi-spoilers will follow in this chunk of the video. So if you've never played Dead Money and you want to go into it absolutely cold, please jump to the timestamp on the screen. Most, if not all of this information has been gathered from dialogue and terminal entries. Sinclair is the businessman who built the Sierra Madre, and Vera is the person for whom he built it. Everything was designed to be a very remote casino resort for only the wealthiest of pre-war America. The villa was designed to make access extra difficult by not allowing any sort of car to use its narrow roads, and the casino building was designed to hermetically seal in the case of anything close to a nuclear attack, with the security holograms programmed to protect the casino patrons. Vera was a singer and actress that had stolen Sinclair's heart, and he built this entire thing as a means of both spotlighting and protecting her from what he foresaw was coming. Unfortunately, Vera came with some luggage, an almost crippling Med-X addiction, and a previous relationship with Dean Domino. These people were alive more than 200 years ago, so we know that they are dead now. Well, except Dean, but during the second half of the game we get to find out how exactly both Vera and Sinclair died. I won't go into that because those would actually be some major spoilers, and that's not what this video is about. I just wanted to stress the fundamental importance to the story of these characters. But since I mentioned the Indomino, he was part of the initial story, more than 200 years ago, and through some twist of fate, instead of being killed by the radiation, he got ghoulified, and has been spending the past 2 centuries exploring the villa, avoiding the ghost people, setting all manner of traps, and placing the occasional emergency stash. During this time, he has become resistant to the cloud and has also developed a particularly useful recipe for what he calls the Sierra Madre Martini. Having him as a companion will decrease the amount of damage that the cloud does to you by 25%. Dean was, or is, a singer and entertainer from before the war. He's the one who introduced Vera to Sinclair and is an asshole of tremendous proportions, which he makes clear from your first encounter. The extra things you find out about him as you explore the DLC do not put him in any better of a light either. There is a way in which you can keep Dean alive at the end of the game, but most dialogue choices will inevitably lead to a violent confrontation. And I had nothing against that because, like I said earlier, Dean's a dick. Dog/God is a Nightkin who is showing signs of the split personality caused by prolonged Stealth Boy use. His personalities are split between an instinctual and violent one, Dog, and one that is highly calculated and controlled, God. Elijah makes use of the Dog personality to do his bidding. In fact, you are brought to the Sierra Madre by Dog. His mind created the God persona as a means of protecting Dog from his worst instincts. You can choose which of the personalities you'll want to aid you. Each of them will offer a different type of companion perk. Dog/God, while a fairly compelling character, is probably the least story relevant or impactful, because the others already have links either with the story or the other characters in the story. Dean is an example of the first, Christine is of the second. You find Christine in an auto dock, and she's been obviously and heavily operated on. Her head and throat have been previously opened to such an extent that she cannot speak anymore and also can't read or write words properly, but can still do math. When Christine is your companion, her perk will allow you to delay the detonation of your bomb collar when in the range of speakers or radios. Her link is to Elijah, having been sent by the Brotherhood of Steel to assassinate him for all his past doings since the Helios 1 debacle. She also has a very strong connection to Veronica, the companion from the base game who gives you most of the information about Elijah prior to this DLC. In the second half of the game, Christine regains the ability to speak, but not with her voice. Instead, she speaks with Vera's voice, because Vera's voice was the key to opening the vault. So now we come to Elijah, the crazed ex-elder of the Mojave chapter Brotherhood of Steel. A very smart but disturbed old man who not only survived the solo trip to the Sierra Madre after the Brotherhood expulsion from Helios 1, of which he was responsible by the way, but also researched the villa and the casino and set up this elaborate method of controlling people to do his bidding when it became apparent that he needed help to access the vault. He perfected the bomb collar during his exploration of a place called the Big Empty, which is where Christine had her head operated on, because she tracked him down and found him there first, reaching the Sierra Madre only after escaping that place with the help of this shadowy character that seems to always be a step in front of you, another courier called Ulysses. Yeah, we'll get to talk about Ulysses in a future video as well. The possible ending slides of Dead Money are very interesting and bittersweet, but in terms of the actual climax of the game, there are several possible endings, with a couple of premature ones, in the vein of Fallout 1's you siding with the Master and you failing. But the one that makes most poetic sense is also the one that is most time sensitive to obtain. But I strongly suggest you do it because basically the story asks for it. Elijah should indeed die for all the crimes and lives he has ended on his quest for the Sierra Madre, but by far the most satisfying and story appropriate ending is to lock the motherfucker in the vault. And I say this because the other option, a straight up boss fight, is both anticlimactic as well as deeply unsatisfactory, at least for me. I had to do it a couple of times just to get the achievement and some cool death footage. But this isn't how my headcanon of this DLC ends. In my head, I locked Elijah in the vault for the rest of his shitty life with no ways or means of ever getting out.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, ghouls and ghosts, it's time for Stefan's miscellaneous musings. Take it away, old chap.
That was weird. Anyway, the final dog/god quest. Let me put this out there in case you didn't know, but timed quests suck. And the dog/god quest isn't actually a timed quest, but if he sees you, you're screwed. It's a very abrupt shift from the usual Fallout quest format, and I did not much enjoy it. It does make sense from a character standpoint, but it seemed a bit off kilter from a Fallout standpoint, even when considering that Dead Money is a different sort of approach to the usual Fallout structure. But just like with the Black Mountain example from my New Vegas video, on this playthrough I found a completely different way of solving it. Normally you would be inclined on stealthing around the room and closing the valves so that dog/god doesn't see you. But for whatever reason, I just couldn't get it to work this time around. He would sometimes not move around the room, I would just not be careful enough. I also forgot I had several stealth boys on me, so I'm not saying it's the game's fault I was stuck, it was my own. But from that self-inflicted issue came a new solve idea, and instead of trying to stealth around and shut off the valves, I played God's message to send Dog back to his cage, and thanks to my 100 speech stat, I managed to merge the two personalities, after which I shut off the valves and whatnot. Necessity is indeed the mother of all invention, even when said necessity is caused by one's folly. Pre-war money. The Sierra Madre was the first place in the Fallout franchise where you could actually use pre-war money for something other than rocket launcher ammo. In the Sierra Madre you can exchange pre-war money for Sierra Madre chips at an exchange rate of 1-for-1. So that's how we can conclude that the value of one chip is $1. So you might want to consider starting collecting pre-war money during the DLC, because it wastes nothing, and once you gain access to the casino, you'll have a bunch more chips at your disposal. Now, even though you can technically only use the chips within the DLC, which you will still need to purchase steam packs, doctor's bags and various other ingredients, especially junk food if you're into making Sierra Madre martinis like I am. But there is a way of spending them outside of the DLC as well, because Elijah somehow set up a vending machine in the Brotherhood of Steel abandoned bunker, which is present in the base game. So you could still use the Sierra Madre chips once you're out of the DLC. Obviously you might not need to once you're back into the world of the caps based economy, but I'm just saying they're not useless once you're back in the base game. Pre-war steak. So this is a funny thing. It is very weird that 200-year-old prepackaged food is still somehow edible. The reasoning for that is that in the Fallout universe, small doses of radiation somehow preserve things. Or in the case of ghouls, ginormous amounts of radiation can make you a near immortal walking mummy. But then again, we know from all the terminal lore that the Sierra Madre Casino was designed and built with a nuclear attack in mind, and was capable of hermetically sealing in case of any sort of radiation or toxic attack. As such, the casino building has sealed itself when the bombs fell, and then everything went to shit because the holographic security system went nuts and started killing everyone. So technically speaking, things inside shouldn't be that irradiated. Much less so food in the still functioning freezers. How exactly they've been working for over 200 years without any maintenance or anyone defrosting them, I don't know. Suspension of disbelief kicks in at this point. I'll go with it. But everything has a limit, and for me, even the suspension of disbelief. And that limit comes when you want to make me believe that after 200 plus years there is still something left out of that pre-war steak. It should have turned into frozen dust from the freezer burn ages ago. I mean, I've had plastic wrapped pieces of meat in the freezer for more than 6 months and they were barely salvageable. An unprotected slab of meat in the freezer would cease to exist within a couple of years. The Sierra Madre radio signal. I found it interesting and highly ironic how the Sierra Madre radio broadcast, the thing that attracts you to the location, is considered to be a siren song, luring foolhardy adventurers to their demise with the promise of riches and the dream of beginning again, when in reality it was supposed to be a call for help. This is the emergency signal in case of attack, but because the broadcast was tied to the gala event, instead of the actual emergency signal going out when the bombs fell, the gala event invite is the thing that gets sent out because the bombs fell right before the gala started. Dead Money is my favorite of the New Vegas DLCs because of the characters, of the story, and the overall post-apocalyptic Casablanca vibe it has. Now, I am aware that the inspiration behind using Sierra Madre as a title was taken from the Treasure of the Sierra Madre. Likewise, the themes of paranoia and companions having to work together because the circumstances require them to. But I found its aesthetic and vibe much closer linked to the more well-known Humphrey Bogart movie. I could see the villa being a fairly active little town, much like Casablanca is portrayed in the movie, and the stories told in the DLC of sort of love triangles, finding one's true self, regret and double crosses could easily fit into Casablanca, but you know, with a reddish filter on it. Dead Money was just as I remembered it, maybe a little bit better somehow, because this time I could appreciate its atmosphere and world building that much more. And I'm very much looking forward to experiencing the other DLCs and see how they make me feel now. But until we see how honest our hearts are, I am very curious to find out what you think about Dead Money. Hey there, dear watcher who's still watching, thank you very much for sticking around. I've started a Patreon page, so if you want to, and obviously can, throw a couple of bucks my way to help me get more gains and improving my studio editing equipment, go there and check out the various tiers and rewards. If you can't do that but you still want to help me grow my channel, don't forget to like the video, comment on it, share it with other like-minded individuals, and most importantly, subscribe and then click that bell notification button. It's really important. I've been Steven Ansons, thank you very much for watching, see you next time and have a great rest of the day.